Hi, welcome back to the Escape Room Scholar. In today's session, we'll be thinking all about puzzles and how we can design puzzles for our educational escape rooms. So, let's dive into puzzles for our educational escape rooms. How do we design a puzzle? Well, I think it's first worth asking a more fundamental question, and that is, what do we want our learners to actually learn? What are our, in educational speak, intended learning outcomes, or what do we want the students to take away from it and know that they didn't know beforehand? Now, doing this allows us to think through what's the purpose of our educational escape room and helps us focus on that. Now, this could be really broad, depending on what discipline that you're actually working in. For example, it could be, I want my students to be able to debug a piece of code and identify common syntax errors within the code. Or maybe a medical one could be, I want my students to be able to identify various skin conditions and suggest a treatment for those conditions. Or maybe a history one, I want my students to be able to identify and put in order the various things that were leading up to the effects behind leading up to the English Revolution or the American Civil War or something like that. And so that helps us crystallize, okay, what's the purpose of this? What's it all going to be about? But now that we've done that, and that's probably admittedly the slightly dull part and the less creative part, let's get to the creative part where we're actually designing the puzzles to implement this educational escape room. Because remember, it's not just a bunch of exam questions. We want our escape room to be something that is fun, but not just for fun. There should be education in there somewhere, not just a recreational escape room after all. Well, we have a bunch of constraints to think through that guide how we actually create our puzzles. One of those is, well, what's the purpose of the activity? Is this going to be like a revision activity, or is it an application of theory activity, or are we trying to apply, explore a new area, or just create a general awareness of a particular area? Secondly, who are my learners? What do they already know? How does this connect with everything else they've learned? How have they been prepared for this? What are they learning in other subjects? How does that all coalesce together? And how, when they hit the escape room, what are they going to be ready for? Then, how do we actually create and connect our puzzles with our themes that we've been talking about previously? From a more practical point of view, most of my puzzles relate to a numerical answer. So how do we create an answer that's between 1 and 8 digits in length? And also, we don't want to just simply lump in exam questions and say, well, solve this and then solve this and then solve this. Because once you do that, it's not actually a game anymore. And we're all about game-based learning when we're dealing with educational escape rooms. We might also want to think about what props could we include to make it more immersive and fun and fit in with that theme better. It's worth thinking about what sort of puzzles are appropriate for us to prototype. And what I'll do is I'll give you a broad theme or a schema of puzzles, the sort of ways that I create puzzles that are really helpful to think about. The first type of puzzle that I've often used is some sort of a puzzle that uses some sort of a cipher or some sort of substitution. Now, these might be the puzzle themselves, or they might be to give us clues or elements within that puzzle to get people working together to decipher them. And there's lots of different possibilities here. Everything from the common pigpen cipher to various substitution ciphers, Caesar ciphers, Braille, using the periodic table, even a Klingon language cipher. One website I use a fair bit to do this is the Decode.fr website, which has hundreds of free ciphers that you can use, and you can use them to connect more closely with your narrative. For example, if it's a Star Trek narrative, having the Klingon cipher would actually fit really well. If it's a chemistry narrative, having the periodic table cipher would probably fit in really well as well. Now, some of our puzzles involve some sort of a mathematical computation. This could be specifically a maths puzzle, or it might be some other use of maths. For example, I've developed a biochemistry one where you're calculating all sorts of concentrations of various elements and working out what their concentration is in moles and things like that. It could be a communications engineering one that I've done where we're looking at the free space path loss of different paths of different frequencies of communication links. Or it could be stepping through a series of lines of code in C or Python or something like that and working out what a particular signed integer or unsigned integer equals at the end of those. They're all computation in some way, shape or form. It might be that there's some sort of a hidden element within the whatever you're given. Maybe it's a chunk of code that doesn't fit. Maybe it's an error in a line of code. Maybe another one I designed was a whole series of photographs of different locations, and you're working out what is the OH&S hazard in each of those. It could be a tripping hazard, it could be a slipping hazard, or it could be the can of gasoline that's right next to the welder. That's a hazard as well. And in that case, you've got a grid and you need to work out which square that hazard fits to within your grid. It could be some sort of obfuscation where you're just trying to make something a bit unclear. That Decode website I talked about has a few of these type of puzzles, and the most simple ones are where you do a mirror writing or something like that, where if you look at the writing in a mirror or if you hold it up to the light back to front, you'll be able to see what the right answer is. Sometimes our puzzles have some sort of technology associated with them, and this can help create immersion and make the escape room more believable and going beyond just a simple paper-based activity. In the past, I've used various cipher wheels and things like that. I've got circuits that you actually solve part of the circuit using an oscilloscope or a multimeter, and you're probing things. It could be elements like protractors or rulers, or maybe even something a bit more advanced using, for example, augmented reality or virtual reality. Now, sometimes we struggle with how do we get a numerical answer from these non-numerical sort of quantities? And one thing we can use is a lookup table. Basically a table where we map certain features or pictures to numbers. I've created these in the past with, for example, you could have a periodic table one. You could have a series of logic gates where each logic gate maps to a particular number. I've done them with gearboxes in the past. Basically, whatever picture feature you've got, you can map to various numbers. Some of our puzzles also require some sort of a physical reasoning aspect to it. For example, knowing that water runs downhill, or knowing that when you couple two gears together, if you turn one of the gears, the other gear rotates in the reverse direction. And so you have this or this going on. In that particular case, what I did is I actually 3D printed some gears so the students could actually have them and look at how they interact with each other. And then when you put a rubber band on them to simulate a belt drive, they could see that, oh, now they're turning in the same direction. Some of our puzzles require some sort of a classification to be performed. For example, one I did recently on cybersecurity is where students had to classify between phishing emails and non-phishing emails, or social engineering attempts via text message and non-social engineering attempts, just a normal text message, for example. That helps people classify, oh, okay, is this good or is this bad? Is this nefarious or not? And some of our puzzles require us to combine various elements together. Maybe get them in the right alignment or the right shape or the right order or something like that. There might be cutouts in various things that mask various bits out. There might be different colored light filters and things like that filter out things we don't want to see and don't filter out things that we do want to see. I've seen all these sort of puzzles before as well. Some of those times, a bit of paper over the piece of another bit of paper, or something laser cut even, could be the key to solving something. Likewise, when you're using a cipher wheel or something like that. Hopefully this gives you a good framework for how we design our different puzzles. And when you're approaching thinking, okay, here's what I want to teach as part of this educational escape room, here's my intended learning outcomes. Which of these sort of ways, whether it be a mathematical approach or whether it be some obfuscation or whether it be what's wrong in this picture or what's wrong in this scene, gives you some ideas of how you could jump to an escape room puzzle from something that looks more like an exam question. Because remember, we don't want those exam questions, we want puzzles, and we want puzzles that fit in with our particular theme. Well, that's all for today. Happy escapifying, and hopefully escape rooms are making a classroom near you more engaging.